Hello, everyone, and I'm Marco Contreras, and I will be presenting my artificial blood vessel presentation. So we're going to begin with an overview. We're going to discuss material capabilities, and this revolves around the tight margins associated with the human body environment and the biocompatibility requirements required from the materials that we select for testing. Then we will discuss the human body scaling size, and then we'll finally come to a conclusion on our material selection. So for a frame of reference for the sake of the experiment, it was decided that due to the large range of the human circulatory system, a frame of reference was necessary. So for an adult human male, the ascending aorta was made the focus as our blood vessel for analysis. Now for our experiment parameters, the volumetric flow was calculated to be 0.0000254 cubic meters per second. And this was found from research based on the velocity flow and the pressures and the viscosity of blood within the human artery. Now, for the diameter sizing for the ascending aorta, it was found to be within a range of 2.3 to 3.5 centimeters. And this was gathered from a range of research. And it was decided that for the experiment, 3.1 centimeters in diameter would be used. And it was also found that it had a thickness of 1.9 millimeters, which was rounded for 2 millimeters or 0.2 centimeters for the sake of the experiment. Other parameters included the body regulating temperature at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, which comes out to 310.15 degrees Kelvin. And it was found that it had an average pressure of 16,500 to 17,500 pascals. And this is created from the heart continuously pumping blood throughout the body. Now, for our biocompatible materials, for our first option, we have polycarbolactone, PCL for short. And this is a biodegradable polyester material, which is capable of reproducing the fibrillary structure of natural blood vessels. It was also found this material was also very easily moldable. Now, for chitosan, or CS for short, is a natural biopolymer material which is gathered from chitin, which is actually found in the shells of crustaceans. It was found that chitosan has a low thrombogenicity, which means has a lower chance or minimal chance for blood clotting. It was easily functionalized with bioactive materials such as gelatin to enhance its performance overall. For our last material, we have polyetrofluoroethylene, EPTFE for short. This is a synthetic polymer, and this has already notable usage already within the medical field. One issue that was found across multiple studies was that it had conflict with body acceptability, which typically led to infection and thrombosis occurring. Now, for our simulation specifics, we will be testing the pressure reactions for all the materials. We'll also be conducting stress and strain analysis and be observing the displacement that takes place for all three of the materials. For the SolidWorks simulations, we'll be using lengths of 1 millimeter, 10 millimeter, and 100 millimeter for each of the biocompatible materials. And for the simulations, we'll be using our initial flow rate, which is what we calculated and discussed before. And we'll be using a 5 times flow rate, which is 5 times the initial flow rate that we discussed. Now, here are our simulation results. For PLC, the stress values for the 10 millimeter vessel length were significantly higher than the other two materials. And for EPTFE, the strain and stress values were generally lower than those of PLC, which shows EPTFE standing a little bit more out than PLC. Now for CS, the strain and stress values were in between those of PLC and EPTFE, but the displacement values were significantly higher than those of EPTFE, which could be an indication of possible failure when it comes to the usage of chitosan. Now, it appears that chitosan did perform better than the other two materials in terms of minimizing strain, but with the factor of displacement in mind, it still doesn't seem to be a clear winner. Now, I took all the results for the 100 millimeter length and initial flow rate experiments, and I visualized them for you. As you can see, compared to all of them compared together, you could see that for strain PCL stood out to be displaying the greatest amount of strain compared to the other two not even being able to appear on the chart. For displacement, we can see that Chitisan and PCL were very similar in their displacement, with EPTFE standing out to have minimal controlled displacement. Now for stress, we can see that Chitisan stood out to have the least amount of stress, whereas PCL had the most. Now, excessive strain is not really suitable to withstand the cyclic strains and stresses that occur due to the pulsating blood flow. And excessive displacement could lead to an increased possibility of leaks and blockages, whereas minimal displacement can be a good indication of it being able to withstand and be capable to function within a human environment. Overall, all the materials did perform proficient in the stress analysis. Now here are our charted results for the 5 times flow rate. We can see that as length increased, pressure decreased, which was expected. And we can also visually see the amounts of displacement PLC showed. This clearly is an indication that PLC under these conditions would actually fail when actually used for these artificial blood vessel creations. And then we can see with EPTFE and CS and PLC that all the stresses remained consistent, which was a good indication for this experiment. But as we look at the strains, we can see that PLC showed the greatest amounts, whereas EPTFE showed the least amounts. Now we can look on the top corner, we'll see the pricing for each of the materials. For PLC, it comes out to $30 to $50 per kilogram, whereas EPTFE comes out to $75 to $150 per kilogram, and Chitisan comes out to $50 to $200 per kilogram. And this is a much wider range due to the availability of Chitisan. It's much more specialized in the gathering and manufacturing of this material, which leads to the cost being greater. Now for our reasonings, we'll take all of these factors into considerations. And so based on the simulations results and the price factory, it was decided that EPTFE was the best material for blood vessel construction. EPTFE displayed strain levels within operating parameters and just enough displacement to indicate it can handle the stresses and strains of the human body without being non-existent, because to have no displacement would mean the vessels are rigid, and we do not want rigid vessels. We want them to be able to go with the flow per se. And then also it was found that EPTFE withstood controlled levels of strain, which indicated less likelihood of the possibility of failure. Now with EPTFE being more controlled and leveled than the other materials, along with the factoring of pricing and its material properties, which we will discuss, it stands to be as the best choice for our material selection. Now here are some EPTFE properties that want to go deeper into this material to show just why I picked this material. So EPTFE has great porosity, which means it's great for filtration and containment, which is also why this material is being found in studies where new dialysis procedures are being developed. EPTFE is also biocompatible, meaning it is non-toxic to the human body and therefore would not lead to any unnecessary or unprepared for events that occurred with the usage of this material. It was also found to have a low chance of thrombogenicity, which is essentially the low chance to clot, which is better than the other materials, and it shows that with some biocompatible material science, we could even minimize these risks. It was also found to have a high tensile strength, which means there's no chance for rupture or deformation, which is great for blood vessels. We definitely do not want to have a blood vessel rupturing, especially within a patient. And it has a high durability, which means it's functional for long periods of time with no degradation. This essentially means that for an artificial blood vessel fix that could have maybe have lasted 6 months, 3 months, it could now potentially be extended to 1 to 3 years. And for artificial blood vessels, that is actually a great feat for the field. And it is because of all this in conclusion that EPTFE was selected as my material. That is everything, and thank you for the opportunity of letting me present to you. Thank you, and have a great day.